May 26, 1991. Lauda Air Flight 004, a Boeing 767 with 223 people on board, is flying over mountainous jungle terrain northwest of Bangkok in Thailand. The flight has just taken off from Bangkok and is bound for Vienna, Austria, when the crew notices some unusual alerts from the aircraft, but after consulting their checklists, they determine that the flight can continue without issue. 6 minutes later, the plane is out of control and falling to the jungle below. Eyewitnesses report hearing an explosion and seeing the plane in flames before it impacted the ground. What errors did the pilots notice? Was this an act of terrorism? Was it possible to recover this flight? Find out on this episode of Black Box Down. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Black Box Down. It's Gus and Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
We're here with another episode. Very excited to talk about this one.
Yeah?
I'm excited to talk about all of them. This one in particular is very interesting, I think. Before we get to it, of course, I do want to remind you to give us a follow on social media at Black Box Down Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're there. We're posting images and stuff that maybe you have trouble imaging. Yeah.
Where are you?
You should really check it out, especially if you're not there, like Chris said.
Also, I wanted to thank everyone who supports us through premium memberships or our first class experience, where you get ad-free and early episodes and some bonus content and you can find out more info on that at blackboxdownpod.com.
Yeah, just $2.99 a month.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. We're watching. That sounds ominous. Okay, so Lauda Air, Flight 004. Like I said, a Boeing 767-300 ER made for Lauda Air was delivered on October 16th, 1989. I'm sure you've probably, I assume you've never heard of Lauda Air. They don't fly anymore today, nowadays.
No.
LAUDA. This is an interesting airline, Chris. It was based out of Austria, and it was started by a former Formula One racing champion. Formula One's like the racing, like super high-speed, high-performance cars.
It's a big deal here in Austin.
Yeah, there's a track here in Austin. There was a Formula One race not that long ago. So there was a F1 racer, very prolific in the 70s, named Niki Lauda, and he's the one who started this airline.
That name sounds familiar, more so than Lauda Airlines.
Did you ever watch the movie Rush? It came out in 2013. It was about race car drivers. Niki Lauda was one of the main characters in the movie Rush, if you ever watched that.
I don't know if I did.
Very well known. You may have heard the name in passing at one point, but he founded the airline in 1979. Eventually, it ceased operations in 2013. When Niki Lauda first retired from F1 racing, he decided to go start an airline and run his airline. He claimed he had no more desire to continue the silliness of driving around in circles.
Yeah, but it's flying around in circles.
Well, not necessarily. You see a lot of the world. You get, high above the ground and can see things. And in fact, he became a pilot. He was one of the pilots for Lauda Air, Chris.
I mean, I imagine he must be if he started an airline.
Yeah, he decided he wanted to become a pilot and started flying.
Comfortable if you're like, and world-renowned race car driver Lauda is in the cockpit and he'll be
I've read a lot of accounts from people who were like, they think it's really cool when, they get out, they flew on Lauda Air and, the voice that comes over to greet you on the plane was him. Like he was like, oh, wow, he's actually in the cockpit flying. Eventually he did retire from flying, and he recorded like the welcome messages that they would play for people, so that on all Lauda Air flights.
That's cool. This airline, it's got some personality.
Real personality. Niki Lauda, like I said, amazing race car driver, super prolific career. He actually suffered life-threatening injuries in an F1 crash in 1976. That left him with severely scarred with third-degree burns over a lot of his head and his body. His Ferrari swerved off the track, hit an embankment, and burst into flames, and he was trapped in the wreckage. And on top of the severe burns to his head and hands, he inhaled toxic gases that damaged his lungs. And it was a whole thing. They weren't sure if he was going to live after that crash. It was really, really bad. However, that being said, he only missed 2 races.
What?
Yeah, he sat out for 42 days and then immediately began racing again. He almost won that season. He lost that season by 1 point, despite the fact he sat out for 2 races. Absolutely amazing. And the reason I'm talking so much about Niki Lauda, obviously it's Lauda Airlines. He personally involved himself in this investigation. he wanted to get to the bottom of this.
Wow.
And, he said, it was his name on the airliner. He was a pilot and flew these planes. Like he was really involved and very hands-on in the business.
And wanted to like make it right.
Well, yeah, he wanted to find out what happened. Was it the airline's fault? Was there something wrong with the plane? What caused this tragedy?
Lauda's on the case.
Yeah, I think all of this is super, super interesting and makes for a fantastic story. Regardless, like separated from the actual tragedy of the incident or the accident, I think it's even Niki Lauda's story itself is super fascinating, and the fact that he was so involved is really interesting to me. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. just trying to give a little bit of a little further background to the accident we're going to be talking about today.
No, I'm invested in this airline already, more so than I am in like any of the other airlines.
So, like I said, Lauda Air 004, regularly scheduled passenger flight from Hong Kong to Vienna, Austria, with a stop along the way in Bangkok, Thailand. This happens all the time. Flight went from Hong Kong to Bangkok. They were supposed to keep going to Vienna, and it was between Bangkok and Vienna that it went down. The flight departed Bangkok at 16:02 Universal Time, which is 11:02 p.m. local time in Thailand, on May 26, 1991. So this was a late night flight. It was going to be a red eye. It was under the command of American Captain Thomas J. Welch, who was 48 years old, and Austrian First Officer Joseph Thumer, who was 41 years old. And Lauda Air, it was never a big airline. I don't think they even operated in the United States, which is probably why you never heard of them and never flew on them. But they operated 3 weekly flights between Bangkok and Vienna. The weather was reportedly fair. There were no discrepancies noted in any aid to navigation, no troubled radio transmissions. The takeoff report from Bangkok was successfully transmitted and recorded. All pre-flight, ground, flight operations appear routine. And, that's always like the scary thing, right? It's like everything seems fine until all of a sudden it's not.
Yeah. There's no, they should have seen that warning.
Right. Nothing out of the ordinary up to this point. At the suspected point of the event, the onboard computer readout indicated the airplane was at an approximate altitude of 24,700 feet, a speed of Mach 0.78, and developing climb power. So all that is to say that this was pretty quick after takeoff. They were at 24,700 feet and still climbing. They were not at their cruising altitude yet. So this was not immediately after takeoff, but several minutes after takeoff while still trying to get up to their cruising altitude. And like I said, eyewitnesses reported seeing the plane in flames and hearing a loud bang and watching the plane fall to the ground, covered in flames and impact the ground. And everyone on board was killed in this crash.
Seeing flames and then a loud bang and then hitting the ground?
I don't think they specified the order in which things happened. However, that being said, it would not be unusual since the speed of light is so much faster than the speed of sound. That's why you see lightning before you hear thunder. So even if they did see the flames first and then hear the bang, I wouldn't necessarily consider that out of the ordinary, depending on how far away they are. So, of course, Thailand's Aircraft Accident Investigation Committee led the investigation, and we're going to be referring to their report here. And what they said was, at 5 minutes and 45 seconds after takeoff, what was a normal flight, the pilot in command stated, "That keeps coming on." The crew was heard discussing an indicator that kept coming on and off. Specifically, it was REVISLN. It was just flashing, letting them know. And what that stands for is the reverser isolation, thrust reverser isolation.
Oh.
This indication appears when a fault has been detected in the thrust reverser system. The first officer read information from the Airplane Quick Reference Handbook as follows. Additional system failures may cause in-flight deployment. Expect normal reverser operation after landing. The pilot in command remarked, "It's not just on, it's coming on and off." He said, "It's an advisory thing." And shortly thereafter stated, "Could be some moisture in there or something."
And this is the thrust reverser. I mean, that's for landing where it reverses, like shoots thrust the opposite direction, right? Slow down.
Right. It basically redirects the thrust so that it's not pushing out the back of the plane, but instead is redirected in another direction to help, slow the plane down to come to a stop.
And the mechanism of it, it's just like a thing that like lowers to like cup the air.
There's a couple of different ways that thrust reversers can work. It used to be that they were almost like clamshells where they would deploy around the back of the engine and just so the engine was still putting thrust out the back and the clamshell would close around that and then kind of redirect it to the front. Okay. Kind of like if you put your hand over like a blow dryer or an air compressor or something and you're redirecting that force.
Yeah.
The one on the 767, and the way it works in most planes nowadays is it's almost like a sleeve over the engine that opens up, and the thrust kind of redirects out the front part of kind of around the circumference of the front part of the engine.
Okay.
So there's different mechanisms. The one in the 767 was not that clamshell style, but more like a sleeve that redirects around the circumference of the front of the engine.
Okay.
And specifically, this alert, reverser isolation, the indication that kept coming on and off, in order for these thrust reversers to activate, there's safety mechanisms to keep it from activating by default. And one of those is this reverser isolation. It's like a valve that closes off the hydraulic fluid from the thrust reverser so that no hydraulic fluid gets into it so that it can't deploy.
Okay.
And in fact, I believe on the hydraulic system for the 767, there's two different valves. There's the reverser isolation, which stops hydraulic fluid from getting into the system. And then downstream from that, there's another valve, which I want to say is called like the directional control valve, which also needs to activate in order to allow the hydraulic fluid to get into the system. So first, you have the reverse isolation, which stops hydraulic fluid from coming in at all. Then that's opened. Then the next, it gets prepared to go into the system. Then once the reversers are activated, the directional control one opens up and the hydraulic fluid goes in and the reversers activate. So there's two valves. This alert that they're getting is about the first valve.
Okay.
That kind of like seals off the hydraulic fluid from getting into the system.
Oh, I'm just throwing out ideas. Is there like hydraulic fluid leaking or something?
So what I would speculate at this point when they're seeing this, it's not necessarily that it's a leak. It's not telling them that there's a lack of fluid. It's telling them that the reverser isolation is coming on and off. That would make me think that the reverser isolation valve is failing. So that hydraulic fluid could be passing by it and getting up to the directional control valve.
Okay.
That's what my takeaway from that would be. Not because if it was a leak, there would be a separate warning about hydraulic pressure being inadequate. Like I said, this is about just under 6 minutes after takeoff that this comes up and they have this discussion. Then 10 minutes and 27 seconds into the flight, Thumer advised Captain Welch there was need for a little bit of rudder trim to the left. And, trim is just helps them kind of keep the plane stabilized without having to give constant inputs. A little bit of rudder trim, not a big deal. Fairly common. 15 minutes into the cockpit voice recorder flight recordings, the first officer was heard saying, reversers deployed, followed by sounds similar to airframe shuddering. 29 seconds later, the recording ended with multiple sounds thought to be structural breakup. Welch's last recorded words were, Jesus Christ, in response to the rapid rolling sensation, followed by, here, wait a minute, as he shut down the engine, and then, damn it.
Oh, no.
Flight 4 disappeared from air traffic radar at 1617 Universal Time, about 94 nautical miles northwest of Bangkok. The airplane was destroyed by in-flight breakup and crashed in the mountainous jungle terrain about 6 kilometers, which is 4 miles roughly, northeast of Phu Toi Huai Kamin village of Tambul Huai Kamin in the Bandang Chang district of Suphanburi province of Thailand, and everyone on board was killed.
So the reverse thruster deployed...
Thrust reverser.
Thrust reverser deployed eventually on one of the sides?
Correct.
And so that would create like a spin?
Yeah, so you would continue to have normal thrust on one side and then reverse thrust on the other side. Yeah, which would cause you to not necessarily spin, but like yaw and bank at the same time. So you'd be like rotating across two axes into the direction of the reversed engine. And so then this, like you said, it creates this asymmetric thrust really to an extreme. And this caused the plane to enter an aerodynamic stall, and the plane went into a diving left turn. Like I said, there's a bank and a yaw to that direction. A mid-air thrust reverser deployment on engine number 1 caused the routine flight to break up in mid-air during an uncontrolled dive that killed everyone on board, resulting in the deadliest accident involving a Boeing 767.
Oh, man.
I believe this was the first hull loss, actually, for a 767. The flight data recorder tape was heat damaged, melted, and unreadable due to the post-crash fire. Engineering simulations would be necessary to determine the details of the accident. And on behalf of the Accident Investigation Commission of Thailand, the U.S. NTSB requested the Boeing Commercial Airplane Group to develop an engineering simulation of in-flight reverse thrust for the conditions thought to have existed when the left engine thrust reverser deployed in the accident flight. And of course, these tests show that, or they suggest, I should say, that the airplane experienced a nose-down pitch accompanied by abnormal roll and yaw. So the question is, one, how did this happen? And two, was this recoverable?
Yeah.
Like, those are the things that the investigation's going to want to find out. So, they're going to look into this specific airplane, but also the 767 in general. So this specific plane, like I said, was a Boeing 767, was manufactured to the specifications of Lauda Airline and had two Pratt & Whitney 4060 engines. Engine records indicate the left engine was installed on October 3rd, 1990, and the right engine was installed on September 15th, 1989. The airplane log, dated May 26, 1991, shows the airframe with 7,444 hours and 1,135 cycles of operation. So nothing was terribly old on this plane or like super used or anything. Not super used, super worn out, I should say. I don't know. Like nothing should have failed.
Nothing, no warning signs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not one of those planes we talk about where it's like, this plane was 50 years old. And
and they didn't do maintenance. So
right. These engines, like I said earlier, have those reverser systems that employ blocker doors and cascades to redirect airflow from the N1 compressor fan blades. On large twin-engine transport airplanes, the thrust reverser cascades are slightly below and in front of the wing. And that's just to say, remember how I talked about that sleeve that opens up and redirects it? So the thrust gets reversed. That's what they're talking about. That thrust reversed air or pressure is slightly below and in front of the wing. If you think about like how the wings are mounted under a plane, if you look at them, that's where the engine is. At high thrust levels, the plume of thrust from the reverser produces a yawing moment and significantly disrupts airflow over the wing, resulting in a loss of lift over the affected wing. The loss of lift produces a rolling moment, which must be promptly offset by coordinated flight inputs to maintain level flight. The yaw is corrected by rudder inputs. If corrective action is delayed, the roll rate and bank angle increase, making recovery more difficult. Okay, so then I'm going to explain all that right now. This is important because they have to figure out, why did this become unrecoverable so quick? In certifying the airplane, Boeing maintains, or they maintain that thrust reverser deploying in flight is recoverable. And they demonstrated that before the plane was approved to be airworthy. And of course, the way they demonstrate that is by taking a test flight and deploying a thrust reverser on a test flight.
Just one?
Right. And that's what happened in this flight.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's like, did they...
Yeah.
Okay.
Deploying two. I mean, that's they probably would not certify that, but they have to test one. And in their test flight, they're able to recover it. So then now the questions become, why was this one unrecoverable when in the test flight it was? And the kind of the technical stuff we just talked about, what it's saying is, when the thrust reverser activates and the airflow is disrupted, or I should say, when the thrust is reversed, that air, like I said, comes out all around the circumference of the front of the engine, which is just below and in front of the wing. And that jet of air that's redirected disrupts the smooth airflow over the wing, since now there's the reverse thrust getting shot up in front of it, which is what disrupted the airflow over that wing, which is what caused the left wing to stall, which is what caused them to roll and pitch to the left.
So basically, I'm just imagining the plane's flying and all of a sudden, like the right wing of the plane just kind of freezes, and then the left keeps going, so then it starts dipping down. Dipping down, and
the left engine's the one that had the thrust reverser deployed. Okay, just to be clear,
reverse that.
The right engine keeps going, but then the left thrust reverser deploys, which on top of not producing thrust anymore is disrupting the airflow over the wing, causing it to stall.
So what is the proper protocol for that? I could see, like, I guess it'd be like just turning off the engine turning so that you can start gliding and then nosing down to recover your like speed so you don't stall.
Well, don't forget, you still have one working engine, and these planes can fly fine on one engine. But the first part of what you said is correct. You would want to shut down that engine that has the thrust reverser deployed, increase power on your other engine if necessary, which probably is, and then continue your flight using just that one engine. Well, not continue your flight, declare an emergency, and in this case, probably go back to Bangkok and land would have been the correct thing. So that's kind of now where the investigation is going to start digging into. Is that, they're going to want to find out, is that what the crew tried to do? If so, why was it not successful? And if not, why didn't they do it?
And they're trained on this exact circumstance.
I don't know that they're necessarily trained on this specifically, but it would be something, there would be a checklist for it. But of course, the question is, are you able to get that fast enough?
Yeah.
What happened? They weren't, like we said earlier, they were not at cruising altitude, but they still were pretty high at 24,000 feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna get all into all of that, Chris. So the aerodynamic effects of the thrust reverser plume on the wing, and they're just talking about what I said, that redirected air that's disrupting the airflow, as demonstrated by simulation, has called basic certification assumptions into question. Although no specific component malfunction was identified that caused uncommanded thrust reverse actuation on the accident airplane, the investigation resulted in an FAA determination that electrical and hydraulic systems may be affected. So they're trying to figure out, why did it deploy? Like I said, it's two different valves that need to open in order for the thrust reverser to deploy. Oh, and I see I wrote down here what it is. So it's, like I said, it was the isolation valve, and the other one was the directional control hydraulic valve. I think I was calling it something different earlier, but yeah, those are the two valves.
Okay.
So apparently, as previously stated in an airworthiness directive on August 15th of 1991, which required the deactivation of all electrically controlled Boeing 767 thrust reversers until corrective actions were identified to prevent uncommanded in-flight thrust reverser deployment. So they're just saying that's fairly common. After an accident, they just issued an airworthiness directive to tell people to deactivate these electrically controlled thrust reversers until they were done with their investigation and can figure out what happened. So according to the Boeing Model 767 thrust reverser system design document, the thrust reversers installed on these engines on the Boeing 767 reverse only the fan airflow while the primary flow remains in the normal forward direction.
Oh.
Like I said, because it's not a clamshell on the back. They're just, it's like I said, it's that sleeve that redirects. Thrust reversal is achieved by means of left and right hand translating fan sleeves containing blocker doors that block the fan flow, redirecting it through stationary cascade vanes. The translating sleeves are hydraulically actuated. Reverse thrust use is restricted to ground operation only, providing additional retarding force on the airplane during landings and refused takeoffs. Normal operation of thrust reverser requires that airplanes must be on the ground to close the air-ground switch, with both main landing gear out of the tilt position and the forward thrust lever must be at the idle stop position. So it's got to be on the ground and got to have your thrust levers adjusted. There's a lot of very specific things that need to happen before you can use, or before you're supposed to use thrust reversers.
And that's saying, just to clarify, that's what you should do before you deploy them, or is that what?
Yes.
According to according to the way the plane works, must be done. Like you can't deploy it unless these other things are deployed, like a safety almost.
So the way that this reads is it's saying that the use is restricted and normal operation requires these things.
Okay.
It requires that the plane be on the ground with the landing gear out of the tilt position and the thrust lever must be at the idle stop position.
Okay.
The physical evidence at the crash site conclusively showed that the thrust reverser actuators from the left engine were found in the fully deployed position. Non-volatile computer memory within the electronic engine control indicated an anomaly occurred between channel A and B reverser sleeve position signals. It was concluded that this anomaly was associated with the thrust reverser deployment of one or both sleeves. The electronic engine control data, I'm going to say EEC. I'm going to say it a few times, electronic engine control, EEC. The EEC data indicated the thrust reverser deployed in flight with the engine at climb power. Based on EEC design, it was also concluded the engine thrust was commanded to idle, commensurate with the reverser deployment, and that the recorded Mach number increased from 0.78 to 0.99, but they don't actually know the real maximum speed that was reached because
they got burned.
Well, pressure measurement and recording uncertainties. There was just, I think the system wasn't designed to read speeds that high. It's like when you max out your speedometer, which I hope you've never done in your car.
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. Yeah. Please don't do that. Just the system's not designed for that. And there's just some variables that they can't account for. So the maximum recorded speed was Mach 0.99, which is pretty much almost at the speed of sound. So they're going really fast.
So maybe that's why the boom
Maybe. Don't want to say anything yet. The left EEC data indicates that the fuel cutoff switch was probably selected to cut off within 10 seconds of thrust reverser deployment. So that's kind of to your point earlier. So they did do a fuel cutoff on that left engine within 10 seconds of the reverser deploying. Examination of the cutoff switch also indicates it was in the cutoff position at impact. So within 10 seconds, they did try to cut off the fuel to the left engine to try to stop it. The EEC readout recovered from non-volatile memory in the left engine indicated the airplane was at an approximate altitude of 24,700 feet at a speed of Mach 0.78, developing climb power, when the thrust reverser deployed. The analysis of the major structural damage showed the failures were probably the result of buffeting, maneuvering overload, and excessive speed. So they're saying the plane most likely broke apart because of just like the wind hitting it, giving it too much maneuvering inputs, which we've talked about, caused another incident, and just the fact that it was going so fast, like faster than it was rated for. Parts of the airplane that separated from buffeting overload appear to be pieces of the rudder and the left elevator. This was followed by the down and aft separation of most of the right horizontal stabilizer from maneuvering overloads as the crew attempted to control the airplane and arrest the high-speed descent. No evidence of impacts were observed on the leading edges of the horizontal and vertical stabilizers, indicating that no airframe structural failure occurred prior to horizontal stabilizer separation. So what they're getting at here is that the airplane started coming apart in the air before it impacted the ground.
And that's they're trying to recover it, and the force of like going basically against the wind is what's breaking it apart.
Right. Remember, we talked a long time ago, one of our earlier episodes about the vertical stabilizer that came off a plane when
when the pilot was like wiggling it.
You're right.
During like
gave it too much force.
Yeah, he was like wiggling it during takeoff, and he was also maybe in the tailwind of another plane. Was that what it was?
Yeah, that was exactly it. So these things happen. You can't give full deflection when you're going over a certain speed because it's just too much force.
Yeah.
And that's why planes are normally rated for, on top of that, most airframes and most planes are rated for to go certain speeds and not any faster because things can start breaking apart. So it's a combination of these things.
Okay.
So it's thought that this imbalance in the empennage, like the tail, from the loss of the right stabilizer, introduced counterclockwise torsional overload into the tail, as evidenced by wrinkles that remained in this visible in the stabilizer center section rear spar. So it's almost like parts of the horizontal stabilizer came off. They were still trying to maneuver the plane, and it was like twisting the tail to the point where it left wrinkles in the airframe.
So yeah, it was bending it in wrinkles.
Yeah, so it's like the tail was like twisting. If you imagine grabbing like the nose of the plane and the tail of the plane and like twisting it in opposite directions. Yeah, and it caused wrinkles in the airframe near the tail. That's how extreme the forces were that were acting on this plane.
They were going real fast then.
Yeah, it was really bad. So the loss of the tail of an airplane results in a sharp nose over of the airplane, which produces excessive negative loading of the wing. Evidence was present of downward wing failure. The sequence is probably followed by the breakup of the fuselage, and the complete breakup of the tail, wing, and fuselage occurred in just a matter of seconds.
Oh, so the horizontal stabilizer snapped, then the tail broke off.
Right, and then
the plane split in the middle.
Well, and then the wings also broke off.
Oh my God.
It was a complete breakup of the tail, wing, and fuselage. Yeah, everything.
Everything's just falling. Oh my God. That's terrifying.
It's awful.
Have we talked about an incident where a plane just broke into pieces all of a sudden in the air like that?
Lots of times when that happens, it's explosives. It's a bomb.
Yeah.
And this investigation actually initially looked into that theory, because like I said, there was a boom. There was a fire. The plane was broken up into a bunch of pieces. I think when investigators first arrived on the scene, that was the working idea, was that this was a bomb to have caused the plane to have blown apart like this. But of course, they can't find evidence of a bomb. When there is a bomb, there is a source for the energy that causes like an outward bending of the metal and an outward explosion. And of course, residue and whatnot, and they couldn't find any of that. So then, it's like, well, this looks like a bomb, but there's no evidence of a bomb. But yeah, anyway, going back to your question, have we talked about, we've talked about planes that have broken up, like have had individual components break off or like multiple components break off. But I don't know if we've talked about one that has gone to this extent.
Yeah, like broken up so conclusively.
Right. Or so fully.
Yeah, like, okay. It's a lot of
breaking up.
Black Box Down is sponsored by BetterHelp. I don't know about you, but I love user manuals whenever I get a new product. I like flipping through it, making sure I understand how everything works and what all the different buttons and doodads do. It's unfortunate that life itself does not come with a user manual. So when it's not working, sometimes, it's normal to feel stuck. Navigating any of life's challenges can make you feel unsure, whether it's career change, new relationship, becoming a parent. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient and accessible anywhere, 100% online. I think when you have questions, being able to talk to a therapist, someone with an outside perspective is really great. Whether it's learning coping skills or self-empowerment or dealing with something you're going through, I think it's awesome to have that outside voice to listen and then give feedback. As the world's largest therapy service, BetterHelp has matched 3 million people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists, available 100% online. Plus, it's affordable. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to match with a therapist. If things are not clicking, you can easily switch to a new therapist anytime. Could not be simpler. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. Learn more. Save 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/blackboxdown. That's betterhelp.com/blackboxdown. Today's episode is sponsored by Honey, the easy way to save when shopping on your iPhone or computer. Me, I love shopping online whenever possible. I like getting everything done online, avoid seeing people in person. And I'm sure you feel like I do whenever you're checking out and you see that promo code field that's empty. It just infuriates you that you don't have anything to put in there. But thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. Honey is the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it finds to your cart. So just imagine you're shopping on one of your favorite sites. When you go to checkout, the Honey button appears. All you have to do is click apply coupons. Just sit back, wait a couple seconds. Honey searches for coupons you can find for that site. And if Honey finds a working coupon, you watch the prices drop. It's really that easy. I've used Honey for quite a while now, and it works on so many different websites, and I've saved on countless things. It's really hard to keep track of how many things I've saved money on or how many times it pops up. It's great because, like I said, it's so many websites. It's not like you have to go to one specific site and use it. It's just always there and is always ready to hop in, whether I'm buying sunglasses, whether I'm buying clothes. It's just right there. Super easy to use. Honey doesn't just work on desktops. It also works on your iPhone too. Just activate it on Safari on your phone and save on the go. If you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this show. I never recommend something I don't use. So get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/blackboxdown. That's joinhoney.com/blackboxdown. Are you wasting money on subscriptions? 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about. Maybe for you, it's an unused Amazon Prime account or a Hulu account that never gets streamed. There's a great app I use that helps me track all of my expenses because of it. I no longer waste money on subscriptions I don't use. You might have heard of it. It's called Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill. The app shows all your subscriptions in one place and then cancels for you whatever you don't want. Rocket Money can even find subscriptions you didn't know you were paying for. You may even find out you've been double charged for a subscription. And to cancel a subscription, all you have to do is press cancel. Rocket Money takes care of the rest. Get rid of useless subscriptions with Rocket Money now. Go to rocketmoney.com/blackboxdown. Seriously, it could save you hundreds per year. That's rocketmoney.com/blackboxdown. Cancel your unnecessary subscriptions right now at rocketmoney.com/blackboxdown.
So, like I said, they did these simulator tests, and assuming simulator tests with 25% lift loss are a valid model for the accident conditions, simulated flights piloted by Boeing's chief 767 test pilot indicated a recovery could not be accomplished unless the flight crew of Lauda 767 took full corrective action within 4 to 6 seconds of reverser deployment.
Oh.
So that's a big asterisk, right? It's like, yes, they could have recovered this, but they needed to do it like in 5 seconds. Like immediately. Do everything. Like 1, figure out what's wrong, and then 2, do everything you need to do in 5 seconds.
So it'd be like, the thrust reversers deployed. Boop, turn it off. Kill the engine, and then what else was it like?
they would have to reduce the engine to idle, hit the fuel cutoff, give it corrective rudder and aileron inputs, as well as pitch inputs. So it's like turn all this off and immediately give full controls or take over full flight controls and counteract the forces you're suffering from.
In 4 seconds.
Yeah, 4 to 6 seconds.
Which is like, that seems challenging if you know it's going to happen.
Right. And I think that I think in the simulations they were able to do it, anticipating that it's about to happen.
Yeah.
But like if it happens out of the blue, no, there's no way.
Yeah.
The use of full authority of the flight controls in this phase of flight is not part of a normal training program. Further, correcting the bank attitude is not the only obstacle to recovery in this case, as the simulator rapidly accelerates in a steep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators examined possible pilot reactions after entering the steep dive, and it was found that the load factor reached during dive recovery is critical, as lateral control with the reverser on one engine deployed cannot be maintained at Mach numbers above approximately 0.83 when combined with load factors above 2.5 G. This is because the effectiveness of their flight controls is reduced at high Mach numbers.
Oh.
And the airplane configuration remains asymmetrical due to the deployed thrust reverser. So the faster they're going, the less effective their controls are, which is why they need to immediately apply those controls in order to have enough control, enough effectiveness to be able to counteract it.
And if it sounds like they did do that, and the force was so great that it just snapped the plane apart.
Right. And like it was, their inputs, or I should say the effectiveness of their inputs is reduced, and the force is so great that it starts snapping apart.
That's terrifying. If you're like, all right, I know how to fix crack.
Yeah. Then it was too late.
Yeah.
And I think, this was one of the reasons that we talked at the beginning, that Niki Lauda was so invested in this investigation. Since, one, it was his airline, and two, he was also a pilot. He wanted to know what was this, was where did the fault lie, but, again, is it like the other investigators, is this going to happen again? Is this something that, he needs to be worried about, or that other people need to be worried about? And that's kind of why I mentioned that, early on at the very top of the episode.
Seems like a movie almost.
It really kind of is.
He's like, I want to get out of the game of, life and death situations and the high speeds and and then he gets sucked
back into it. Yeah. So since August 14th of 1990, there were 13 maintenance actions logged on the left engine thrust reverser system of this plane, almost always in response to recurring propulsion interface monitor unit messages of EEC, channel B, reverser, RNG fail. And also EEC, channel AB, REV, CR, CHK fail. And these are, of course, errors related to the thrust reverser system.
Okay.
The right engine thrust reverser had 3 maintenance items logged against it, and the majority of the corrective actions involved removing and replacing valves or actuators and adjustments to the system.
So the left one has a reoccurring issue, seems like.
It had 13 actions. I don't know that it was necessarily... Maybe I'm hesitant to say. I guess looking at the report here, it does say these are recurring propulsion interface monitor unit messages. But yeah, so I guess I was hesitant to say recurring, but the report says recurring. So yes. So Lauda had accomplished all the troubleshooting steps from the Boeing fault isolation manual. Lauda the airline, not Lauda the person.
Yeah.
Without correcting the problems of the recurring PIMU messages, a propulsion interface monitor unit. Lauda personnel stated they were in the process of conducting a complete inspection of the left thrust reverser wire bundle for damage before the accident occurred. And it was found that Lauda was not remiss in continuing to dispatch the airplane and troubleshoot the problem between flights. No specific Lauda maintenance action was identified that caused uncommanded thrust reverser actuation on the accident airplane. So, like the report said, this was an ongoing, recurring error, and they were troubleshooting it between flights, but they were still continuing to use the plane. But the report does not give them any fault for that, saying that, they were not at fault for troubleshooting it and trying to work on it this way. Because like I said, even when the pilots looked at the quick reference handbook when this error came on, they said, oh, it's fine. According to the checklist, we can keep going.
Yeah. So basically saying that maintenance and stuff, they were doing okay. They weren't negligent.
Right. And we've talked about this before where maintenance is negligent or it's like, why didn't they take this out of service? According to the manuals and according to the process, they were doing the right thing. This was not abnormal.
It sounds like there's a problem in the process.
Yes. So after Boeing's inaction to confirm the cause after numerous simulations, Niki Lauda pushed for confirmation in a press conference that in-air thrust reverser deployment would be unsurvivable. Because, Boeing's, they're incentivized to not say it was a plane problem. So, Niki Lauda uses his clout to go in a press conference and say Boeing needs to take responsibility for this.
I bet you that gets a lot more press. I mean, just because he's the famous.
Yes.
Yeah. It's like, that's cool. I guess that he had the ability to do that since he was in the right.
Right. And it kind of makes you scared. Like, what if he hadn't done that? We've talked about other incidents where, parents of people involved or whoever, like someone needs to come forward and say, like, we have this proof. Boeing, you need to do something about this.
Yeah.
Lauda he went on to say, this was the first time in 8 months it had been made clear that the manufacturer was at fault and not the operator of the airplane or Pratt & Whitney.
Wait, first time in 8 months after he made them say it? Or
well, there's it was 8 months after his after the accident that he had this press conference.
Okay.
Like it took 8 months for all of this to come to light. And, in his mind, it's very clear to him, it was not his pilot's fault. It was not his airline's fault. It was not the engine manufacturer's fault, but this is Boeing's fault. So that's why he has a press conference to say, Boeing, you need to take responsibility for this and you need to do something about this. Because the official investigation took about 8 months. That's the 8 months that he's referring to.
Okay, and so he now has the report.
Right, the report's out, and he knows. Again, he's been very involved in this investigation, so that's why he's trying to get something done about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's got his name on it.
Yes,
and I'm sure he cares about all the people involved. On multiple reasons.
Absolutely, he was very. From all reports, he was very hands-on with this airline. Obviously he's a pilot and he, wanted to make sure everything was just right. He was very, not one of those like CEOs who's super detached. It's his name on the plane. He's very invested in making sure everything goes right. The report, like I said, comes out and the probable cause says the Accident Investigation Committee of the Government of Thailand determines the probable cause of this accident to be uncommanded in-flight deployment of the left engine thrust reverser, which resulted in loss of flight path control. The possibility of crew-commanded thrust reverser deployment was considered, but the probability of an experienced crew intentionally selecting reverse thrust during a high-powered climb phase of flight is extremely remote. There was no evidence of pre-accident failure or malfunction of the airplane structure, power plants, or systems. I guess one of the things that I had mentioned earlier that we didn't come back to that is probably good to talk about right now is, remember I mentioned that before the plane was certified that they took a test flight up and they deployed the thrust reverser and they were still able to fly. And they said, there, see, if it happens, it's fine. The plane can keep going. What happened was when they did the test flight, they were at a much lower altitude. I believe the test flight was at 10,000 feet, where the air is thicker.
I was going to say, is air's quality. I said not quality, but denseness.
The density. Yeah, exactly. The air is more dense. So that's why in the test, they were able to recover and continue to fly. I also think that when they did the test flight, not only was it lower, but I believe the flight was also slower. It wasn't going as fast. So that's why in the test flight, they were able to recover and fly with the thrust reverser deployed. But in the real world, when they were at a higher altitude and going faster, it's a totally different experience. The Accident Investigation Committee of the Government of Thailand determined the probable cause of this accident to be uncommanded in-flight deployment of the left engine thrust reverser, which resulted in loss of flight path control. The specific cause of thrust reverser deployment has not been positively identified. The Austrian Federal Ministry of Public Economy and Transport agreed that this report is a fair record of the investigation, but regrets that the report was unable to form any conclusion as to the reason for the uncommanded thrust reverser deployment, which was the fundamental cause of the accident. So that last part sounds a little scary, but I'm going to give a little bit of background into that. So like I said, there were two valves that need to open in order for the hydraulic fluid to get into the thrust reverser, like I mentioned earlier. They had the reverser isolation valve, which was the one that they were getting errors about, and then the directional control hydraulic valve. So hydraulic fluid is cut off from the system. The isolation valve was what's isolating it. So the isolation valve opens, lets hydraulic fluid get in a little bit, And then when the thrust reverser is supposed to be activated, the directional control hydraulic valve gets commanded to open. It opens, and then hydraulic fluid goes into the system.
So, and I don't know a ton about how hydraulic fluid works. Is it just like a high pressure fluid that pushes like the mechanisms to turn and bend, and
it does operate based on pressure. As controls are manipulated, the system becomes more pressurized or less pressurized, and that pressure acts on the hydraulic system, which can cause anything powered by the hydraulic system to activate, whether it's thrust reversers, flaps, a lot of the flight controls in large airplanes. It's all just a pressurized system. And what they speculate here is that there was already a pre-existing problem with the reverser isolation valve. And most likely, they can't say definitively, which is why they say they can't say definitively what the fundamental cause of the accident was. The going theory is that there was an electrical short in the electrical system, which caused the directional control valve to then open as well, which then allowed hydraulic fluid into the system. They couldn't really examine the wire bundles too much because of the post-crash fire, but they say that is most likely what happened. There was a fault in one valve, then an electrical short caused the other one to open. The hydraulic fluid went into the system, pressurized it, and caused the thrust reverser to deploy. They don't say that definitively in the report. That is the going theory, though, that is most widely accepted. Which is why, remember, I said they were inspecting wire bundles. Maintenance was looking at the wire bundles before this flight. That was part of their ongoing maintenance.
They're looking at wire bundles because...
in relation to this system, to see if that was causing these errors that were recurring.
And so... I guess it's like there's a safety as in two things have to happen for this to deploy. And one was malfunctioning kind of regularly, and the other one just had that
electrical short
at the right or worst time.
Yep. And again, they don't say that definitively in the report, but that is pretty much the going accepted theory. It seems very likely and very plausible, but they don't say things in these reports unless it's 100% certain. They want to be absolutely sure of things that they say.
Was there any other theory that they're like, this could have been it, but we don't think it's the case?
I don't think so. I think this is pretty much it.
Okay.
So of course, there were findings here. The crew members were trained, qualified, and certificated for their respective duties according to the laws and regulations of the Republic of Austria. It's an Austrian airline. The airplane was certificated, equipped, and maintained, and operated according to regulations and approved procedures of the Republic of Austria. Weather in the area was fair. No reported hazardous weather. Although lightning may have been present, it's possible the horizon was not distinguishable. It was nighttime, and they were not over a city, so sometimes it's hard to see the horizon at night. The physical evidence at the crash sites showed the left engine thrust reverser was in the deployed position. Examination of non-volatile computer memory in the left EEC indicated the engine was at climb power when the reverser deployed. Engine thrust was reduced to idle with the thrust reverser deployment, and the recorded Mach number increased from 0.78 to 0.99 after the deployment. Actual maximum speed reach is unknown due to pressure measurement and recording uncertainties. The scatter of wreckage indicated the airplane experienced in-flight breakup at a steep descent angle and low altitude. And we talked about this actually fairly recently, that, when investigators first arrive at a crash site, they try to locate the four corners of the plane to determine whether or not it hit the ground intact or not. They want to find the nose, the tail, and the two wingtips. And in this case, they were not all together. They were spread out, which indicated it broke up before it hit the ground.
God, that's so terrifying. Just the plane falling.
There was no indication on the available wreckage of an in-flight fire prior to the breakup of the airplane. Oh yeah, I forgot to expand on that. Most likely, the fire was once the plane broke apart and the fuel came out into the air. It may have hit like the hot engines, and then that's what caused people to see the flames as the plane was coming down. Examination of the available wreckage revealed no evidence of damage from a hostile act, either from within the airplane or from the exterior. They also looked into on top of a bomb, they also looked into the possibility that a missile was fired and hit the plane.
Oh, just throwing it out. Yeah.
Well, because since the plane seemingly exploded and broke apart so completely, it's like, well, we mentioned this earlier, you and I, when we were talking. It's like, was there an explosion? Why did this plane break apart like this? Simulations of a 25% lift loss resulting from an in-flight deployment of the left engine thrust reverser indicated recovery from the event was uncontrollable for an unexpected flight crew. That's what we talked about. They had such little time. If they weren't expecting this to happen, there's no way you could have recovered in time.
Yeah, that's what's so scary about this.
Yeah. From an airplane flight performance standpoint, questions remain unanswered regarding thrust reverser plume behavior at high Mach numbers and in-flight reverse-induced airframe buffeting at high Mach numbers and effects of inlet spillage caused by a reversed engine at high Mach numbers. It's just a scary thing to deploy the thrust reverser when you're going fast.
Yeah.
And they can't answer all of the questions about what happened because it's something you really can't test. You know, if you do this in real life,
the plane crash.
The same thing, right? The same thing could happen to you. And I think that it might be difficult to do in simulators because we don't really have the data on what would happen, you know? It's just like a super scary thing to happen. Thrust reverser system certification by the FAA required that the airplane be capable of continued safe flight and landing under any possible position of the thrust reverser. However, wind tunnel tests and data used in the simulation of this accident demonstrated that aerodynamic effects of reverser plume in flight during engine rundown to idle resulted in 25% lift loss across the wing. Simulation of the event disclosed that the airplane was not capable of controlled flight unless full wheel and full rudder were applied within 4 to 6 seconds after the thrust reverser was deployed. That's what we talked about. They lost lift in the wing, and then they needed to immediately deflect the control wheel and apply full rudder within 4 to 6 seconds.
Yeah, that's just the amount of time it takes to register. There's a problem, and wait, what is the problem? It's like that seems like that was enough time. That was all they had. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too late at that point.
Yeah.
Investigation of the accident disclosed that certain hot short conditions involving the electrical system occurring during an auto restow command could potentially cause the system to momentarily move into the deploy position. However, no specific wire or component malfunction was physically identified that caused an uncommanded thrust reverser deployment on the accident airplane. So this is the speculation part that a short could cause this, but they couldn't find the specific wiring where a short happened. I should say this was difficult for them to find any wiring because of the fire, but two, also after the crash, there was some looting of the site before investigators arrived, and some components were taken. In fact, I believe the reverser isolation valve was missing for a while, and they couldn't find it. They had to offer a reward to locals, and eventually someone turned it in.
Yeah. I was thinking about that one that happened. What was it in
Vietnam?
Vietnam, where they're yeah, that made me think of that. Where they're like, we got to pay him for it because
it was a similar thing. They speculated the reverser isolation valve. They said it was like a gold color. It might have been brass or something. I don't know specifically what metal it was, but they said it had a gold color, so people might have thought it was valuable. So it was missing. Eventually, they put up a reward for it. Eventually, someone turned it in. But after they received it and started looking at it, they realized that it had soil inside of it, which indicated that someone had already opened it and kind of taken it apart. So even though they received it back, they couldn't trust anything from looking at it because someone had already obviously messed with it.
Was it one of the little Informer videos where you talked about the radioactive?
Yeah. Parts of, yeah.
I'm just like, that's what I'm thinking about when people are pillaging planes. The fact that there's a radioactive part that at times, not now, right?
No, they don't use that anymore.
In the past, that they could have been picking up and then like, I wonder how much this is worth.
Oh, yeah. I believe, so you're talking about counterweights that were used early on in the 747. They were made out of uranium. I believe they were stamped as being uranium and radioactive. But again, I don't know. It might have only been stamped in English, right? Like if it crashes in another country, someone might not know. I don't know if it had like a symbol on it or anything else.
And I guess that's a very rare, that's a very specific. But I'm just still thinking about it, like when you're taking apart, like, oh, what's this? I'm taking this, and then.
Well, Chris, this entire podcast is about rare, weird things happening.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, just a couple more findings here. Testing identified hypothetical hydraulic system failures that could cause the thrust reverser to deploy. However, no specific component malfunction was identified that caused an uncommanded thrust reverser deployment on the accident airplane. No specific Lauda air maintenance action was identified that caused uncommanded thrust reverser deployment on the accident airplane. The design changes recommended by Boeing and thereafter mandated by U.S. Federal Aviation Administration Airworthiness Directive 91-2209 for the Boeing 767 thrust reverser system should effectively prevent in-flight deployment even after multiple failures. So that's even though this is in the finding, this is the kind of thing you want to hear. There were design changes made and mandated in order to prevent in-flight deployment, even if there are multiple failures in the thrust reverser system.
So, and I guess those were adequate design changes.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about them right now.
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to try to explain them. I'm not an airline pilot. Two, I'm not an airplane mechanic. So I'm going to do my best to try to walk through the changes that were made. And the NTSB issued 4 urgent action safety recommendations to the FAA on July 3rd, 1991, regarding this accident. And then they issued a letter, I should say the FAA issued a letter on September 11th, 1991, describing FAA actions in response to the accident. An international industry and government task force reviewed the design, philosophy, and certification. As a direct result of testing and engineering reevaluation accomplished after this accident, Boeing proposed thrust reverser design system changes intended to preclude the reoccurrence of this accident. And the changes were mandated by the FAA Airworthiness Directive, like I mentioned. In-service Boeing 767s were modified by incorporation of a Boeing service bulletin by teams of Boeing mechanics, and the fleet modification was complete in February of 1992. Design reviews and appropriate changes were also carried out for other transport airplanes. So specifically, the Boeing 767 design changes were based on the separation of reverser, deploy, and stow functions, and they did 6 things. They replaced the solenoid-operated hydraulic isolation valve with a motor-operated hydraulic isolation valve. They added a dedicated stow valve, added new electrical wiring from the electronics bay and the flight deck to the engine strut, and critical wire isolation and protective shielding is now required. So that kind of that specific one leans into the short idea. The other ones are like dealing with the valves, adding a valve, replacing the way that the valves work, but then also adding new wiring and isolating it and shielding it so that there is no short.
Further validates the
short theory.
Of the short.
Yep. Adding a new reverser system maintenance indication panel in the cockpit. Replacing existing reverser stow proximity targets with improved permeability material to reduce nuisance indications. So that's just like to kind of refine the system so that there are no false negative errors where you get warnings that don't mean anything.
How they had been having where it had been going on and off, and they're like, oh, it's okay.
Yeah, right. So that when you do get an error, you pay a lot more attention to it instead of, oh, it's probably nothing.
No guy, whoever it is, cried wolf.
Right.
and I'm not saying that they're like that. They were following instructions, but the instructions like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
And the last one was adding a thrust reverser deploy pressure switch. So this was really a scary incident, but a lot of really good things. A lot of things were learned, and a lot of really good design changes were incorporated in thrust reversers to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. It's just this is another one. Like so many incidents that we talk about where it's like, oh, all these little things had to fail and line up just right in order for this to happen, and create this terrible tragedy.
Yeah, and so in the end, was like Niki Lauda, was he like, I guess, recognized and validated in his efforts to, seek out the truth about this?
I don't think he was ever necessarily looking for recognition or, I think he just wanted to make sure that, one, that the airline was cleared of fault, and two, that this wasn't going to happen on any other planes like it. And so from that perspective, I would say, he was validated. It wasn't, they definitely said it was not the airline's fault, not the mechanic's fault. It was definitely on Boeing. And, changes were made in order to keep this from happening ever again. Okay,
good. Yeah, because I like him.
Niki. Yeah, really, really interesting.
I looked up pictures of him. He looks like a badass. Can I say that?
Yeah, he absolutely was. I mean, he won multiple F1 titles. Then when he retired, became a pilot, flew airliners. Started an airline. Like absolutely amazing life that he had, and amazing things that he did.
And he lived to 70.
Yes, even after being in that terrible crash and fire in the 1970s. I think the crazy thing is that he went back to racing. He only missed 2 races, went back and still almost won the title, lost only by 1 point that year. He admitted that, he missed after the fire, he missed those 2 races. He admitted that when he did go back to race, his first race back, that he was terrified. He said he was absolutely petrified.
I bet.
Yeah, but he still did it. He went back out there, and even after the fire, he still won a couple of championships after that. He did not let it stop him at all. He won the championships in. So his accident, the fire was in 1976. He won championships in 1975, 1977, 1984. He lost the 1976 one by 1 point. He almost won that one too. Super interesting.
I think you could do 2 movies on him. One of him race as a race car driver. The other one of him starting this company, airline, and like trying to figure out what happened to this plane crash.
Yeah, there is already one for the film for the racing side. Remember, I said there's a movie Rush that came out in 2013 that talks about specifically about the 1976 championship for F1. Chris Hemsworth's in it.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's Chris Hemsworth and who else is that? Daniel,
I don't know. Daniel Bruhl. Yeah.
Anyway,
so if you want to know about the non-airplane side, the F1 side of Niki Lauda's life, you can go watch Rush. It came out in 2013.
Well, I have one question. Last. His airline, is it retired, and what ended up happening?
Lauda Air eventually got acquired by Austria Airline. Absorbed. I don't think they continue to have any flights with the Lauda Air painting, or I should say paint scheme. It's just, I believe it entirely ceased operations probably around 2013, I think.
Okay. Well, that's cool.
It's all part of Austrian Airlines now.
I like that it got acquired and kind of absorbed rather than like went bankrupt. And
actually, I just double checked, Chris. Apparently, there are still Lauda liveries in use today. So there are still planes that are flown with the Lauda paint scheme on them, but they are part of Austrian Airlines.
Oh, it'd be cool if I know he's passed away, but he's like, I'm flying the plane.
I think even like I said earlier, even once he retired, he recorded the in-flight announcements and stuff.
Oh,
so you
that's
could still,
cool.
I don't know. I doubt they still use him to this day, but he was still wanted his personality and his presence known on that airline.
We should post a picture of him. Just because he's such a badass.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
On social, and wait, I'm looking at him. Sorry, I'm looking up. There's like him walking around the wreckage and stuff, like investigating it.
Yeah, like I said, he was there. He flew out immediately and wanted to be involved in this investigation and find out what happened. And normally you hear that and it's like, oh, someone's just getting in the way, or they're doing this for some other reason. I think he genuinely helped push this forward and push for Boeing's accountability, and helped make changes to these systems that benefited every person who flies on a plane in the world.
Yeah, that's crazy. He's always wearing that red hat, it looks like.
Yeah, I think he may have suffered some pretty severe burns when he was in that F1 crash, and I think he wears the hat as a result of that.
Yeah. What a cool dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tragic
what a legend.
Circumstance, but cool dude.
Yeah, I was very excited to talk about this one specifically because of Niki Lauda. I'm not a race fan or anything.
Yeah, I'm not either. But
but I think all of that is super interesting.
Yeah.
All right, but that's it for this episode. We'll be back again next week with another one.
Yeah, and get some Christmas presents, merch, Black Box Sound merch.
It's in our link tree on social media, or you can go to store.roosterteeth.com and check out all of our merch there.
Yeah, it's a lot of really good stuff. It's all very comfy, and mugs and stickers, and it's all cool stuff.
Yeah. All right, bye.
Bye.